Hello, we're your hosts, Sourish
and Kuan,
this is WaffleByte,
where we bring you interesting bites about technology,
business,
and things that might change the world.
You can find all our sources in the description,
and you can skip to the chapters you're most interested in.
But for now, enjoy the show. This week, I decided to purchase some brand new ear cups for my Sony WH-1000 XM5 headphones, because my current ear cups, the one that came with the device, they're getting a bit worn out in the sense that they're quite smushed down, so they're not very thick or plush anymore. And I was hoping that potentially some new ear cups would be more comfortable, specifically when it comes to wearing these headphones for like 6 or 7 hours a day, and it begins to hurt the top of my head. However, when I received these headphones, when I received the ear cups, they were terrible. They just they were like thicker, but that's about it. They didn't really do anything. They felt worse. But crucially and objectively, they made the sound worse. Like that's just a fact that it made the sound worse. It muffled the sound a bit more, and the strength of the bass was also worse. And I'm quite annoyed by this purchase. I obviously returned their brand new ear cups, but I honestly don't recommend people buying leather ear cups unless they really, really need to.
Designing ear cups seems to be quite challenging because you need to balance the noise cancelling attributes in terms of how it fits with your ear, but also how it sounds, because as you said, it really makes a difference.
And the thought for this week is, when does gaming tech cross the line to become cheating? For the first topic, we'll talk about Amazon, because Amazon has begun to trial a new service called Amazon Haul in the USA. It's a direct competitor to the likes of Temu and Shein, where everything on the platform is $20 or less, with most items being priced under $10. Their products will receive the same level of customer support as the rest of the Amazon library, including quick delivery and buyer protection. I think it's very smart for Amazon to jump on this train with the fast fashion from Shein and the cheap Chinese product stuff from Temu. They are a bit late to the party, maybe like 6 to 12 months late, but I think maybe Amazon's brand will give them dominance in the space anyway.
It will be quite challenging for Amazon because Temu and Shein, they're both Chinese, and that means it's probably a bit easier for them to navigate the Chinese supply chain and the things you need to do to ship very cheap stuff from China to markets like the US and the UK. But clearly, there's huge consumer demand for cheap stuff from China, and so clearly Amazon wants to get in on the game.
I remember I once had a teacher who was complaining all the time when we called stuff cheap to describe something, and this was in design and technology. We were meant to say stuff is inexpensive if it's like lower in price. However, I think we're perfectly right in saying that stuff from Temu and Shein is very much cheap. And it's just mostly just manufactured garbage, to be honest. And so I think this whole thing, the fact that Amazon saw a value in creating this service, it shows how kind of messed up the consumer, the average consumer is in terms of buying cheap junk. And I think this is fueled, as we said previously, by short form content such as TikTok promoting people to buy cheap stuff.
I've actually bought a couple of things from AliExpress, actually. I haven't tried Temu, but sometimes you can actually have really nice things that you can buy from these Chinese suppliers, because China is very good at manufacturing stuff. They're also very good at making stuff very cheap. And sometimes, just sometimes, you hit the sweet spot. But a lot of the times, they manage to present a product in a very appealing manner, and what you get isn't quite what you had in your head when you click the order button. But I think people, maybe they don't really learn their lessons because they keep ordering stuff, because it's a bit of dopamine, you know, when you keep ordering stuff that looks nice, and when you get something that's less than satisfactory, you kind of just like deal with it.
See, I think AliExpress is a very different service to Temu and Shein. I think it's very much focused on, for example, contacting directly to, or as closely as possible, to suppliers and manufacturers. And so the stuff on there is inexpensive because you're like there's less of a middleman that you're going through. And it's also kind of intended to purchase customized stuff or stuff that you want to buy in bulk to maybe resell over here in the West. Whereas Temu and Shein and now Amazon Haul certainly aren't going in with that mindset. Last episode, we learned that Temu was the most downloaded app in 2024 by Gen Z. And Gen Z, they might continue to stick to what they know, which is Temu, and continue using Temu and Shein. And they might not really use Amazon Haul. However, the older generations are probably not that into Temu. However, they're very used to using Amazon. So will Amazon Haul mainly target the older generation, people who are maybe not as young as 20 or 25, maybe 30, 40, 50? Will those people now get attracted to this idea of fast fashion and buying lots of cheap stuff via Amazon Haul?
What we do know is that the Chinese companies like Temu and Shein have been incredibly effective at marketing. I think Temu had their Shop Like a Billionaire advertisement, and that, I think, in addition to the other rounds of advertising they have done, has been particularly effective at targeting younger people, as you said, Gen Z. And I'm not sure that older generations will be as receptive to advertising. So, on the one hand, I'm not sure Amazon will be able to match their levels of advertising. I don't see Amazon spending so much money in this sector, but I do think that Amazon, the brand, has probably a very large appeal to certain groups of shoppers.
Amazon revolutionized retail 20 years ago, and I think it's excellent that they are still trying to keep up with the forefront of online retail and trying to continue to stay competitive. And as part of that, the products from Amazon Haul will all be shipped within 1 to 2 weeks, as opposed to Amazon's usual 1 to 2 days. Unfortunately, good stuff in this world tends to come at a price. And for example, I went out today to buy my lunch from Sainsbury's. Now, I wanted to buy some ingredients, and that included like a bagel, for example, and a couple of other small ingredients. And I generally try to go for not, for example, pre-made bagels, or not, for example, really highly processed ingredients like guacamole and whatever. I instead tried to go for the most authentic stuff that Sainsbury's has to offer. And even then, it was still expensive. I paid about £8, or £8 or £9 for the equivalent of 1.5 meals, which is just nuts to me, considering I made these meals myself, as opposed to bought them ready-made. So I think people are increasingly unwilling to spend this much money or more money on good quality items when they can instead get, honestly, garbage for extremely cheap. And I don't think we can entirely blame them if good quality stuff continues to cost more and more.
I think the best way to consider this phenomenon is when you have two items who basically do the same thing, but one, say, 10 times more expensive than the other. Now, is the more expensive product better? Yes, absolutely it is. But it's never 10 times better. And I think that's key. And more consumers have started to realize that having a product having a good value proposition is very appealing to them, as opposed to something being particularly high quality. And I think certainly in China, where this arguably originated from, that has been a long-standing tradition, is to seek value. So I think it's interesting to see the Western consumer gain that mindset more and more through shopping on these Chinese apps like Temu and Shein.
For now, Amazon Haul is only available in the USA, but I personally suspect that they're going to expand into Europe, particularly the UK, within the next few months. For the second story, we'll take a look at a Samsung leak, which has revealed more information about the Samsung XR glasses, which are expected to be released in Q3 of 2025. The glasses are set to be a direct competitor to the Meta Ray-Bans, with very similar specs. The glasses will also be powered by Qualcomm's AR1 chip and Google's Gemini AI, in contrast to Meta's own Meta AI. It was initially thought that a screen would make an appearance on the device, but the leak had no mention of it. Because presumably, just as Meta realized with their Orion glasses, we're still way too far away from the technology which enables putting a screen in a compact form factor of a pair of glasses. The Samsung glasses appear to have more features, such as gesture recognition and payment, and I'm not sure exactly how those work, but they do seem like things that Meta could just add via over-the-air updates to their own glasses.
I've given quite a bit of thought, actually, with regards to these smart glasses, because as somebody who wears glasses myself, basically 24/7, I'm used to wearing glasses, and I could do with some more features through my glasses. And I think in certain situations, there are a really good option. For example, if you had children and you were playing with your children, I think glasses would be an excellent medium to record that, because obviously Apple had their Vision Pro commercial or launch event where they essentially suggest that you should hold out your iPhone and record a birthday or something so that you can watch it back later on a Vision Pro. And that's obviously incredibly awkward, and no one wants to be the one holding their phone up to record a special occasion. But if you had glasses, you could record it in a very discreet and very convenient manner. And I think that would be one situation where having a camera on your glasses would be very useful. Similarly, for something like navigation, if you had a voice in your ear that knew where you were and told you to turn left and right, then you wouldn't need to keep checking your phone. And that might even be good for safety if you are biking, for example. So I'm starting to see these situations where it may be useful, but personally, I'm still not going to buy one because it's very expensive and it needs to be charged a lot, which are two things that I don't particularly like, specifically because I require glasses to see properly. Now, Sourish, I know it's a bit different for you, and you've actually just bought a pair of Meta Ray-Bans. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yes. So on Tuesday, I bought some Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses, and I think so. So the reason that I decided to buy these, well, a big reason was because I think it's cool tech, but also another reason was because I think it'd be cool to be able to have these videos from a first-person perspective of things that I've experienced and things that I have seen and done. And as you said, I think being able to do this really easily whilst having both of my hands free because it's already on my glasses, that's kind of like a big enabler for me. And I think it would allow me to capture loads of moments in life and replay them back, whether it be like a week from now or 5, 50, 100 maybe, 100 years from now. That'd be quite cool, looking back with first-person footage of cool stuff I've done.
Maybe it's a bit like writing a diary, but instead of using pen and paper, you're using a camera and a pair of glasses. So it's your first-person perspective, but in video form.
Yes, and I think that's really powerful. And I don't think that's something you can necessarily put much of a price on, which is why I was willing to pay the steep £400 for it, as long as it worked well. Now, they do work very well, but I would say the frames are a bit chunky. Now, I've never really had the need to wear glasses, except from sunglasses. So I'm not necessarily used to what normal glasses feel like, but I do think that the frames on the Ray-Ban Metas are definitely a bit chunkier than usual. And you'd notice that, at least I noticed that when I'm wearing them. But over a long enough period of time, like an hour or two, you kind of, or at least I end up kind of forgetting they exist. The speakers on these devices are actually superb. They're amazing. And when I spoke to the team that made the Nothing Air Opens, they said that they researched the Ray-Ban Metas in particular because the Ray-Ban Metas are very similar in the sense that they're an open design earphone and they're extremely good, which I was quite impressed by. The camera on the device is also pretty solid and the battery life is also decent.
What's the battery life?
The battery usually lasts, so it depends how you're using it. So for example, yesterday I went to the Nothing Phone Community Edition launch and I had my glasses on for maybe 2 hours, and in total I recorded maybe 5 to 10 minutes of footage, and by the end of that my battery was at about 57%. So I think overall
that's actually quite good.
Yeah, overall it's pretty good.
That's actually quite good, yeah.
Because you're not necessarily recording that much video footage, and even if you are, you can just put it in the case which charges it very quickly. So I'm overall quite happy with the battery life. Now, in the queue at the Nothing store yesterday, the two people in front of me actually also had Ray-Ban Meta sunglasses, and I found that very interesting. I think these glasses are actually quite popular, and that's one of the reasons that they're never on sale, and that in the early days they were always sold out. It seems that people actually want these and are willing to pay the price for them, which I'm very surprised by. Next up, let's talk about TikTok, more specifically their parent company, ByteDance. ByteDance has valued itself at $300 billion US, and this news came after they provided a stock buyback offer for that price. But actually, 2 years ago, ByteDance valued themselves at the same price of $300 billion, before falling by 26% to just $223 billion.
ByteDance is probably undervalued. I think overall, given that they're a Chinese company, they tend to be undervalued. If you consider how much money they make and the size of their audience. I think relative to other Chinese tech companies, they have a particularly strong case given the fact that they have a presence in the West, which may or may not end given the legal trouble. But I think overall it has a really, really solid business. And if it was publicly traded, which it isn't, it's a private company, it would probably have a much higher valuation, given the fact that they have such robust products both inside and outside of China. A reminder that whilst outside of China they only have TikTok, inside of China they have multiple very popular apps that I'm sure are very advertiser friendly and therefore make a lot of money.
ByteDance clearly has the systems in place to create globally dominating apps. And this is why I'm surprised by the fact that despite making over $100 billion in revenue, their valuation is only $300 billion, because they kind of have the ability to just spin up a new app idea and try it, and chances are they're going to make billions off of it, which makes me question why their valuation is so low. But as you said, I think the valuation is so low due to the legal trouble that TikTok are facing in America. A few months ago, Biden said that TikTok would be banned from January 2025 if they didn't sell it to an American firm by then. But now that Trump has been elected, there's a possibility that this TikTok ban may be removed, especially after Trump tweeted his intentions to save TikTok in America. Now, this is very much bad for both national security and the population's mental health in general.
I think it's very funny because Donald Trump originally wanted to ban TikTok, but clearly he's since U-turned.
Indeed, and that's because Trump is now extremely popular on the platform, and he even flexed how quickly he's grown on TikTok, which of course will make him like the platform a lot more. Also, a major donor to the Republicans is a huge investor in ByteDance, so I'm sure there's some lobbying going on there. Now, coming back to the idea of TikTok affecting the population's mental health and public security, well, the only American companies that can afford to purchase TikTok in the first place are all the big tech companies. So if TikTok were to be sold, it'd be sold to big tech. And is that really that much different compared to where it currently is?
If TikTok is sold to a big tech company, I think very little would change from a user experience perspective. And this is because currently TikTok has such a winning formula and people are addicted to it. They keep scrolling, they love the dopamine, and that's very good for advertising. I think maybe something that will change is that Western tech companies like Google or Meta might want to integrate their advertising pipeline into TikTok. When you're scrolling, you might see a couple extra ads. From the back end, I think they'll continue to harvest data, like I'm sure TikTok and ByteDance are doing now, just that they might use it for a different purpose.
One concern that people have over TikTok is that the Chinese are sowing distrust within the platform by, for example, serving loads of polarizing content to the American consumers, which in turn makes the American population just a little bit more agitated and kind of more aggressive and less strong as one unit. And the thing is, I'm not sure that this will be stopped even if it's sold to American big tech, because this formula, this idea of showing content that enrages people, that's what gets you the views, and that's what keeps people addicted to the platform. So even if the platform is sold to Google or Meta or whatever, they're still going to maintain an effective algorithm that will do the same thing.
Just to add to that comment, I think when politicians blame China and TikTok on sowing distrust in American society, etc., I think they're really ignoring the fact that it's not really isolated to TikTok. Right? If you're a member of the Russian propaganda department, you don't care if you're using TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or anything. You still have access to all of the platforms you want to sow distrust and misinformation. So I really don't think that TikTok is the problem, or really the Chinese government are using it to suppress certain views or highlight certain views. I think there's a deep issue on American social media in terms of bot activity and the fact that to gain eyeballs you have to be polarizing, and I think that does cause some problems with people disagreeing with each other and having their own feedback loop such that they're pigeonholed into their own views. But I think that's a separate question, and it's not really fair to have TikTok get blamed for this problem.
Finally, let's talk about Chinese smartphones. Chinese smartphone brands, particularly the BBK Electronics family and Xiaomi, are experiencing heightened growth in European markets. Realme in particular has seen very quick growth globally, having been spun out of Oppo in 2018. The European market historically has been, and still is, dominated by Apple and Samsung, who make up 94% of premium smartphone sales. But this year, Honor overtook Samsung in foldable phone sales in West Europe, as the latter seems to be allergic to innovation.
It's very important to segment the market. For us, given that we're in the UK, which is a relatively rich country, even by European standards, and furthermore, given that we're relatively young, I think all we see around in terms of people's smartphones are iPhones. But it's important to realize that for some people, iPhones are still too expensive, even though they've really made it more affordable recently. And so they might go for an Android, and often Chinese phones are very competitive on price. Furthermore, if you go across Europe, in certain countries like Spain, for example, I know Xiaomi is quite big there. So even though we still see Apple and Samsung, as you said, hugely dominate the market, in certain segments of the market that often, frankly, are quite easy to ignore, Chinese companies are making inroads.
When Chinese companies introduced electric vehicles into the European market, they became extremely popular, especially BYD. And after they became so popular, the EU decided to introduce sanctions to Chinese imported cars. So, will these sanctions possibly be extended to Chinese smartphones?
I think this is on a backdrop of increasing global skepticism towards other countries and protectionism trade practices. I don't think, though, that there is sufficient rationale in imposing tariffs for Chinese smartphones because there isn't really a cost advantage of manufacturing in China, or rather, everybody manufactures in China anyways, so that you're not really gaining a big advantage. But I do think that maybe the lower end market is something that Western companies have neglected and therefore let Chinese companies take over and take market share. So from that front, maybe we'll see some companies reconsider their strategy towards middle market and lower market.
Yes, the price of smartphones doesn't seem to vary much between brands, probably because they're all essentially manufactured in the same place by the same factories using the same components. The technique that Chinese companies such as Realme have used to gain traction in Europe has been by having really aggressively low prices and then slowly building up towards the higher end, as we've seen with Oppo, for example. And in fact, when I wanted a new phone 5 years ago, I was stuck between choosing the Realme X2 Pro or the OnePlus 7T, and the Realme had an insane price offering with really top-end specs for just £400 at the time. But will European users ever see these brands as premium, or will they forever be budget brands in the minds of consumers?
For me, there's two things that are noteworthy here. One is that a low-cost strategy is never sustainable, right? So what ends up happening is that a brand is created with a very attractive price, but over time, they have to increase the price to make it sustainable. We saw this with OnePlus, we're probably going to see it with Realme. So you end up with more and more brands being created, and they each go through the same kind of cycle. And as a result of that, I don't think they ever gain a reputation of being premium. Secondly, I think it's important to realize that what is a premium smartphone has somewhat shifted across the years. In prior years, it may have been to do with hardware, and as you said, Chinese companies have very attractive hardware packages in their smartphones. But more recently, with the advent of AI, people are increasingly considering the phone's software and how premium a phone is. And in this front, because of the fact that all these big tech companies like Google, like Apple, they're all Western-based, I think the Chinese companies will have difficulty catching up in the software front. And given that, as I said, people increasingly consider software in their phone purchases, they'll really struggle to become premium.
European customers tend to worry less about the price of their phone. Whereas, for example, Asian, African, and even American customers, they very much tend to look for good value devices. The marketing departments of these companies have been really pushy recently, including paying for ad spots at major sporting events such as the French Open. But the companies also claim that it takes 10 times as much in marketing costs to convert an Apple or Samsung fan to then try out one of their own devices relative to an impartial customer. And I'm not sure that all of these companies are willing to pay that price, but some of them are, with the hopes that 5-10 years down the line, their brand will be much better known in Europe and it'll be a long-term investment that's worth the short-term losses. Either way, it's fantastic that we're seeing the Apple-Samsung duopoly begin to break down.
Do you remember this sound? It is the unmistakable sound of the internet in the 90s, a slow screeching symphony that tested your patience. Back then, loading a single web page could take minutes. Today, we get frustrated if Netflix movies buffers for more than a few seconds. But how did we go from painfully slow internet to the lightning fast speeds we enjoy today? Let's take a trip down memory lane. Our story begins in the 1960s. The internet wasn't even called the internet yet. Back then, ARPANET, the precursor to the internet, was developed by the US Department of Defense. Its primary goal? To send data between computers, and it did at an eye-watering speed of 56 kilobits per second. That is roughly 7 kilobytes per second, barely enough to send a short email. This was the foundation of the internet, and early versions of the TCP/IP protocol, which is crucial to the functioning of the internet, were born thanks to the Department of Defense's research. Fast forward to the 1990s, and the internet started making its way into people's homes with the advent of the World Wide Web. Enter dial-up.
Every day, America Online is making it easier for people to live, work, and play.
Hey, Dan, ready for the game? I'm just finishing up here with my new kayaking friends.
Kayaking friends on your computer?
Yeah, I just got America Online.
Sounds great. Listen, I can't go to the game today.
What?
I've got to send something for my mom's birthday. It's tomorrow. I'll then book plane tickets for our trip next week, and my kids got to go to the library to look up dinosaurs.
Hey, we can take care of all that before we go.
Yeah, right.
Oh, with America Online.
America Online can do all that?
Yeah. How about sending your mom some nice flowers? All you do is click on Marketplace. We place an order.
Call now for America Online, a new way to use your computer to communicate, have fun, and get instant news and information.
The modem connected to your phone line at a maximum speed of 56 kilobits per second. Let's put that into perspective. At this speed, downloading a single MP3 song would take 20 minutes, and if somebody picked up the phone whilst you were online, your connection was toast. Dial-up internet was pivotal in getting internet to everyday people. No longer was it exclusive to academic institutions and government agencies. With that came the rise in the personal computer and World Wide Web. This launched us into a new age of the internet we are all familiar with.
In these modern times, the person who goes to work may not have far to go. But at the Hat of the Month Club, the boss better keep moving. To keep the books, organize the files, write the letters, check out the inventory, find time to create, and still keep on top of things. Yet even a thriving business can reach a point of diminishing returns. A good time to learn about the IBM personal computer.
The World Wide Web marked a start to many of the services we take for granted these days, like early search engines, as well as online shopping companies like Amazon and eBay. Their growth was fueled by the millions of netizens getting online for the first time thanks to dial-up internet.
Welcome to Dodo.
Dodo, I'm ready to move up to broadband internet, but I don't want to spend a fortune.
Well, I'm your bird. My broadband internet plan with unlimited downloads is just $9.90 a month for the first 3 months. Plus call now for free setup options.
Wow, unlimited broadband for just $9.90 a month for the first 3 months?
And call now and you'll get a free MP3 player when you connect.
That'll save me heaps.
Dial-up internet quickly became obsolete, and the 2000s brought us broadband, and with it a true revolution. Suddenly, speeds jumped to between 512 kilobits and several megabits per second. Cable and DSL connections replaced dial-up, making always-on internet a reality. Streaming videos, downloading huge files, and online gaming became possible for the first time. Downloading that same MP3 now took seconds instead of minutes, and yes, you could finally use the internet without worrying about the phone line. 2007 saw the release of the iPhone.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
This kickstarted the mobile revolution. Billions of people in China, India, Africa would gain access to the internet for the first time in the following decade thanks to smartphones and the mobile internet. But smartphones alone didn't change the world. It was mobile internet that truly connected us. In the early 2000s, 2G networks offered basic data services like SMS and slow web browsing. Speeds were only a few kilobits per second, similar to dial-up. Checking emails or loading a simple web page could take a frustratingly long time. Then came 3G, which rolled out in the mid-2000s. For the first time, mobile internet speeds were fast enough to support real-time video calls and basic streaming. 3G networks typically offered speed of 2 to 5 megabits per second, which felt revolutionary at the time. It paved the way for apps like YouTube, WhatsApp, and Facebook to become global phenomena. By the early 2010s, 4G took things to a whole new level.
4G from Sprint, I can download files up to 10 times faster than 3G. Outside. I can stream the movie Airplane to my cell phone. At the airport. I can have a crystal clear video conference with my clients.
Muffin basket or something.
While working off-site. Or share 5 high-speed connections for online gaming while enjoying the great outdoors.
Eat it, Yoshi!
What can you do with 4G? Experience 4G from Sprint. It's more than a wireless network. It's a wireless revolution.
With speeds averaging 20 to 50 megabits per second, 4G networks transformed how we use our phones. Suddenly, streaming HD videos, playing online games, and even working from your smartphone became effortless. It is no exaggeration to say that 4G brought us the app economy.
I'm a Verizon engineer, part of the team that built 5G Byte. We started with America's most reliable network, added 5G nationwide for millions of Americans, and the unprecedented performance of ultra-wideband in parts of select cities where people need massive capacity and ultra-low lag. I'm proud ultra-wideband was named the fastest 5G in the world. But I'm even more proud all that work is going to make a real difference for you. This is 5G built right, only from Verizon.
And now we're in the 5G era. 5G is designed not just for phones, but for connecting entire cities. It has become an enabler for new technologies, such as autonomous cars. With 5G, speeds can theoretically reach 10 gigabits per second. That is fast enough to download a full-length 4K movie in under 10 seconds. Meanwhile, fiber optics were quietly changing the game. Giant deep-sea fiber optic cables enabled incredible data transfer around the world. Right now, millions of kilometers of fiber optic cables crisscross the ocean floor, connecting continents. Each cable contains bundles of hair-thin fibers, capable of transmitting data as beams of light. This means they can carry massive amounts of information, many terabits per second, with astonishing efficiency. Companies started offering fiber to the premise, with plans allowing everyday users to achieve 1 gigabit per second download speeds. At these speeds, you could download an entire movie in under a minute. Meanwhile, Wi-Fi technology also improved drastically, making it easier to connect multiple devices without losing speed. And now, in the 2020s, we've entered the era of gigabit internet and beyond. fiber networks, 5G mobile connections, and innovations in the satellite internet like Elon Musk's Starlink are pushing the limits even further. Starlink, for instance, delivers speed of up to 250 megabits per second, even in remote areas previously unserved by internet providers owing to the prohibitive cost. In-flight Wi-Fi is becoming more and more common, and we increasingly cannot live with the internet. It is incredible how far we've come, from waiting minutes for a web page to load to streaming entire series in 4K. The evolution of internet is a testament to human innovation. So the next time your connection feels slow, just remember it could be worse, a lot worse.
And the thought from the beginning of the episode was, when does gaming tech cross the line to become cheating? Since the release of the Wooting 60HE in 2022, we've seen a surge of interest in analog keyboards. Keyboards which can detect just how far down each key is pressed. This allows the gamer to choose exactly when a key is triggered, and crucially, enables them to rapidly press the same key in a way that was impossible beforehand. Razer and Logitech now have popular analog offerings, and innovation in this space recently led to a new feature which makes what was once the most difficult move to master something that even a novice can achieve in certain games. We've had great gaming tech for a while, such as monitors with increasingly fast refresh rates, or mice with lower latencies. But at what point is it too much? When will some tech be banned from professional esports?
I think the issue we need to consider here is that cheating is when some people have something that gives them an advantage, but other people don't. And so if something that is commercially available is present and everybody can access it, in some ways, if people are able to take advantage of this, this just changes the competition and what you're actually competing in. And this is not necessarily bad. It just means that the competition becomes slightly different. Now, people tend to be resistant to change, so it might be unpopular. But I don't see an issue if it's something that everybody can access. On the other hand, though, you can really appreciate when some gamers who are really enthusiastic don't like the fact that they're taking away some element of skill by using, say, this keyboard. And so you've always got to balance out the pros and cons. But in some situations, I really believe that it can be for the better.
Rules for the technology that you're allowed to use in competitions and games are currently being made by the game or the competition runners themselves. For example, ESL, which is a major esports organizer, has banned the use of Wooting's and Razer's latest features, or Valve has banned the same feature in CSGO, for example. This lack of consistency across games might also become an issue, because it kind of changes what each game is about. And as you said, I think if we do keep the technology permitted in some games but banned in other games, then there are people who are maybe pro in one game but trash in the other game, and vice versa. And I think this is going to be very interesting, but I also think we need more standardization in the esports community about what tech should be valid and what shouldn't be valid.
I wonder if there needs to be a global regulatory body like we have in football, in Formula 1 and all of these sports that have some guidelines on how this should be done. Because as you say, there's so many esports titles, and esports is such a rapidly growing industry that you're going to have discrepancies, and that could be very interesting. I do think that this is something that leagues will just have to figure out themselves, and audiences will have to put up with any confusion in the meantime whilst people sort out a solution.
Games will always become more immersive and even faster and more closer to real life, and the human or the player's real intentions will more easily translate into the movement within the game. For example, brain-computer interfaces or chips such as Neuralink will completely change esports for forever. And how is the industry going to adapt to that? Because if they're struggling to adapt to some new keyboard switch features, are they going to be able to adapt to, for example, brain-computer interfaces? And I think they're going to really struggle. So, as you said, will a regulatory body have to be involved? And the problem is, if they do, will we see what we currently see in F1, which is that the FIA, which is F1's regulatory body, really seems to enjoy stopping innovation from happening and preventing the teams and the engineers on the teams from experimenting too much?
I think there are a couple of stakeholders in this, because companies who might want to innovate in, for example, keyboards, they want to sell these keyboards at a premium and they want to make money. So these people will always be interested in having innovation and leaning into this sort of technological revolution in esports. And they obviously will sponsor tournaments, so they'll get a say on what happens. On the other hand, you might have fans who really want to see the skill of the players. So it's a balancing act, but there's lots of money involved. So I think that ultimately what might happen is that in some way or another, these companies end up making new products that promise to make you play better and thus pocket your hard-earned money. Ultimately, though, I really do think that innovation is a cool thing and we need to encourage it. At the same time, though, we need to make sure that if you're playing a game where not everybody has this piece of equipment, then people can play, can compete fairly and not become the best just by having this one piece of expensive equipment.
Also, if this changes how people think about cheating in online gaming, then maybe all of this anti-cheat fiasco and Linux will not become an issue, because currently many games are not available on Linux purely because the anti-cheat doesn't work on Linux. And therefore, if companies begin to withdraw anti-cheat or change anti-cheat in general, then Linux gaming might explode. But yeah, I'm not really sure like how this will pan out, because will people now begin to care less about cheaters? If cheating is essentially just buying a consumer keyboard for $200, will people not really care about cheating? But equally, we've seen games such as PUBG completely die because there are too many cheaters on the platform.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Monday with a new episode.
And check out the description to sign up to our weekly newsletter. You can also reach out to us on X at the WaffleByte. See you there.